my nanny dropped me. The worst day of my life. My father and grandfather were out with the army in Jezreel. Every time they went out, I staged a little battle with my toy wooden soldiers. I had archers and chariots and flag bearers, and I was only 5, but I would move the two armies forward in formation until they crashed into each other with little bodies flying everywhere. It was a lot of fun, and of course, Israel always won. And of course, my father and grandfather were always the heroes. The king and the crown prince always were the gallant warriors who saved the day and won the battle. Until the day the writer came. Earlier that day, my nanny had to drag me away from my little battle of Jezreel. We ate at the royal table. We ate the best food of the land. It was all I had ever known. And I still had with me my dad's little toy soldier. I held it in my hand for the whole meal. Actually, I took it with me everywhere I went. It was my way of being close to my dad when he was away. Until the writer came. We could hear him pounding on the gate, and I can still hear his desperate, haunting voice, hoarse with shouting and dry from riding. The whole palace seemed to empty into the courtyard to see what all the fuss was about. And there, standing in the safe little sanctuary of our home, a wounded, bloodied, exhausted warrior announced the news that shattered our whole family. King Saul and Crown Prince Jonathan are dead. And no one had any idea what would happen next. Now, we knew that King Saul had been trying to capture and kill Uncle David, who was my father's friend and brother-in-law. And we knew that some people were saying that Uncle David should be king instead of Grandpa Saul. They said David was a better warrior and a better leader, and that David was blessed by God. Even my father supported Uncle David. But we knew that the first thing that most kings do is eliminate the competition, kill all of the male descendants of the old king. And that meant us. For all we knew, David's army could be coming here to kill us right now. King Saul and Crown Prince Jonathan are dead. The news echoed through the halls of the palace like a wave of terror, and as it came crashing into each room, it threw everyone into chaos. When it reached the dining room where we were, my nanny snatched me up and said we had to leave right then. And we ran out the back door and went straight for the woods. She dragged me by the hand until I couldn't run anymore. And then she picked me up and kept running. By now it was dark, but we kept running. I was crying and she was crying, but we kept running. I didn't understand. I told her to put me down. I shouted that I wanted to go home. But we kept running. I want to see my dad. I want my grandpa. But we kept running. They're gone, child. They're dead. We have to get away. So we kept running. We probably ran for several hours before she fell. She was trying to step over a fallen tree and her foot caught on a root. And the weight of her whole body fell on me and pinned me against the tree. Both my legs broke. never felt pain like that before or since. I lived a sheltered life. She knew I was hurt. I mean, it was pretty obvious. She checked to make sure I wasn't bleeding, that it wasn't going to kill me. And we kept running. It's kind of silly, but that's when I realized that I had dropped my dad's toy soldier. Stop! My daddy! My daddy! We kept running. I was all alone in the world, 5 years old and broken. But we kept running. Maybe if we could have seen a doctor. Maybe if we could have stopped to rest. Maybe it wouldn't have been so bad. But I would never walk right again. But we kept going. We slept days and traveled by night. We ate berries in the woods and stole food from farms. Finally, weeks after we left home, we crossed the Jordan River and found someone who would take us in. Makir is a good man. God bless his soul. Everyone around knew he has a heart of gold and that he takes in anybody who's a stranger or a traveler, open door policy. Well, we were both strangers and travelers. We represented only risk and burden to Makir. We were just a frightened woman and a handicapped child. We could do nothing to help him, but he took us in. He housed us and fed us for decades. We became an extended part of his family. Out of caution and fear, my nanny changed my name. My father had named me Meribal, destroyer of Baal. Baal was the name of the gods of our enemies, and I was to destroy them, to be a mighty warrior like my father and my grandfather before him. Yeah, real mighty. Instead, my nanny named me Mephibosheth, which means son of shame. She thought that would make me safe. I mean, if any of David's men came looking for descendants of King Saul, no one would bother with a handicapped boy named son of shame. But I took that name into my heart. It became part of me. My heart became full of shame. Every time I moved, I was ashamed. I was a walking display of shame, if you can call what I do walking. Every time I ate, I was ashamed that I was a beggar. Once I was rich, now I was poor. Once I was a royal, now I was a refugee. I was hiding in a place so dry, its name was Lodabar, or no pasture. Nothing good was there. I was a shameful person in a shameful land. Once I had been safe in the king's palace with guards on every side. Now I was always looking over my shoulder, jumping at every knock at the door, listening for every bit of news that might give a hint of the situation in Israel, wondering if I would have to escape again. Once I was healthy and whole. Now I'm handicapped. Once I was a little boy playing with tiny wooden soldiers, waiting for my daddy to come home. Now I am a man with no home, with shame in my name, shame in my legs, shame in my heart. And then another rider came. 20 years later, and still the rider came. King David wants to see Mephibosheth. My first thought was, so he's found me at last. Why doesn't he just kill me here instead of dragging me all the way to Jerusalem for a big ceremony of killing? How can I describe all of the emotions that raced through me on that long journey southward to Jerusalem? First, of course, was fear. Fear for myself. Fear for my family. Fear for my host, Machir. Would Machir be punished for showing kindness to me? Then came anger. My grandfather was king. My father was the crown prince, and I was next in line. By all rights, I should be king, not David. But what am I? I'm a crippled beggar being drugged to my death before an uncle who betrayed my family and stole the crown from me. I resolved to go down shouting. I may be a man of shame, but David's ears would turn red before the force of my words, shouting his shame all over the palace, declaring to everyone the shameful things he had done to me and my family. They were going to kill me anyway, so I might as well go down fighting with the one weapon I had left, my tongue. Finally, though, shame won out. The first thing I noticed when I arrived in Jerusalem was how much better it was. We had lived in my grandfather Saul's house with a wall and a few guards. But this Jerusalem was a fortress. We just kept going up, 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 up. It would take an army like a horde of locusts to defeat this city. And when I arrived at David's palace, my jaw dropped. Fine cedar paneling, carved with the most amazing pictures. Flowers and gold and linen everywhere. Of course, I wore the best clothes that I had, the best that Machir could offer me. But my best country clothes looked like mere rags before the silk with gold embroidering that the servants in David's palace wore. David was 1,000 times richer than my grandpa Saul, and 1,000,000 times richer than Machir, my host, on whom I relied for my bread, and 1,000,000,000 times richer than me. David had done better than anyone in our family could have. Shame resumed its throne in my heart. When I saw David, I fell to the ground. I tried to say something. Suddenly, all of my rehearsed speeches just flew out of my mind. And as if my mouth was as crippled as my legs, all I could stumble out was, I am your servant. Perhaps the sword would fall anyway. Perhaps I would be dragged out of the room. But I would take my chances with his mercy. Don't be afraid, he said. Yeah, like that was possible. I intend to show kindness to you because of my promise to your father. I knew Dad and Uncle David had been close, but I didn't know of any promises. And besides that, one wouldn't expect a king to keep promises made to the children of his rivals who could threaten his throne. David went on. I will give you all of the property that belonged to your grandfather Saul. How rich was this guy anyway, that he could just give away vast tracts of farmland without the blink of an eye? And then it hit me. Wait a minute. Did he say he's going to give me all of my grandfather's property, King Saul? That means I'm no longer a poor beggar. I'm rich. Uncle David has restored my family's wealth. I'm rich. I'm not as rich as him as all of this, but I'm no longer poor. I'm no longer a beggar. I couldn't believe it. And then David surprised everyone. He said, "You will eat here with me at my table with the royal family." David was welcoming me into his inner court to sit at his table with his royal family. It was as if I was becoming one of his sons. I couldn't believe it. It was too much. And then a wave of shame swept over me again. I bowed to the floor again. Who am I? I'm just a dead dog. Why are you being so kind to me? Well, maybe you'll say I was caught up in the moment, but I was speaking the truth of my heart. I was a man of shame, just a dead dog who deserved to be kicked to the side of the road. But David showed God's loving kindness to me. From that time on, I've been eating here at his table with his family, just like I'm one of his sons. David restored my family fortunes. He restored my family name. He restored my faith in God. He restored my heart. He restored me. I've had a lot of time to think about what has happened in my life. The first thing that I have learned is that we are all Mephibosheths. All of us. We're all sons of shame. Now, my handicap and shame is on the outside. But we've all got them. We've all got broken and wounded places inside of us. We've all got shame haunting the halls of our hearts. But somehow, we're not able to get rid of it on our own. We can't clean our own house. We need help. We need help from others, and we need help from God. Without Him, we're all just dead dogs. The problem is not so much that we can't give anything to God, or that we can't heal our own weakness or sin. The problem is more that we can't even believe that God wants to show His loving kindness to us while we're still broken and handicapped and weak and sinful. We're all handicapped, and God loves us all the same. None of us have any right to love. But God shows us His loving kindness anyway. God transforms us from refugees to royals, from lonely to love. God transforms us from children of shame to children of grace. God's loving kindness never fails, as long as we open our hearts. the second thing I learned is that my name has another meaning. Instead of son of shame, Mephibosheth can also mean dispeller, destroyer of shame. That got me thinking. David showed me God's loving kindness, and that changed my life. It removed my shame, dispelled my shame. Maybe it's time for me to claim this new sense of my name. Maybe it's time for me to claim a new identity. So now, every day when I wake up, I pray that God will make me a dispeller of shame. I ask God to help me show others some of the same loving kindness that He has shown me. I look for people who are feeling like sons of shame, and I try to speak some kindness into their lives to dispel some of their shame. It could be a little gift, or a compliment, or a hug, or a kind word. It could be something small or something large. It could be something unexpected that surprises us both. But I have never been disappointed. As long as I live, I will continue sharing the loving kindness that God has shared with me. That's who I am. I am Mephibosheth.